All right, well, let's gavel this to order, Mike, because I know we're on a little bit of a tight schedule. You got horses to feed, as I understand.
I sure do.
All right, where do you live?
I live on a little ranch that me and my wife bought last year, about 75 miles from Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
About an hour due south from NIU, as a matter of fact.
Okay. All right. Well, I love podcasts that are with folks that I don't actually know at all, and I feel like I kind of know you because you went to NIU. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so we have some cross-pollination in terms of mentors that we've had through Cliff Alexis or Liam Teague or Mia Gormandy or Yuko Asada, who's a dear friend of mine now, or has been for a while. But I'm curious, I'd like to get to know a little bit about you, but also why you reached out to me after a post I made, if I'm not mistaken. Are you still there? Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Sorry, you first. Okay. You reached out to me after a post, and you have been properly persistent, and I appreciate that because my schedule has been absolutely bonkers. And anyway, but I kind of am curious to start off there. What prompted you to want to be on the podcast, and what was on your mind, and maybe we'll go from there.
Well, I mean, there's the obvious shameless self-promotion part, but honestly, I hang out with Yuko pretty regularly,
mm-hmm.
and either stuff you post on Facebook or stuff she brings up that you guys discussed or whatever, you come up in conversation a lot. Mm-hmm. And from what I've seen, since we've been Facebook friends for I don't even know how long, I think we share a lot of background. And I really, one of the things that brought me into this most recent poke to be on the podcast or whatever was I really appreciate the fact that you, even if you don't agree, you at least respect different viewpoints enough.
Mm-hmm.
At least it seems that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's missing from a lot of the world, particularly on Facebook. So
well, can you tell me a little bit about I'm happy to talk about why I feel the way I feel. And by the way, anytime, any part of this chat, if you have any questions for me, just ask, because nobody ever asks questions, and I love it when people ask questions. So this is a conversation, not like I don't have prepped questions here. So,
yeah,
can you tell me a little bit about your background, what makes you respond to some of the things that I've either said or some of the conversations you've had with Yuko? What are some of the reasons you're feeling that way, and maybe let's go from there.
Well, I come from a super blue collar background. My dad started a business when he was now just a little bit younger than I am, mm-hmm. Which I've been involved in my whole life.
What was the business, if you don't mind me asking?
Sandblasting, painting, powder coating. Still in business, celebrating 35 years next year. Mm-hmm. Just moved into a new facility.
Great.
Yeah, et cetera. But yeah, I don't know. I just always feel a little bit of Midwestern love. You're from the Midwest, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I just feel that.
Well, can you tell me a little bit? Because I have a lot of assumptions about NIU. Mainly because of my time with Cliff and Liam, mostly with Cliff, to be honest. I would drive out there 13 hours in a big cargo van with my friend Jeff, and we would drive out there and get our pans tuned and hang with Cliff for a night or two, and then drive back. I stayed with Abe Breiling for a while. Breiling. I don't know if I'm saying his name correct. Breiling. And it's like these weird connections. Now Abe is working on a prototype double second stand for me. Anyway, weird connections, but I never actually was a student there. And now that I'm a teacher at NYU, and I see what a steel band, and now after, I think it's now 16 years, this is the 16th year. Kendall Williams is now on faculty. He's been on this is the second year now. There's now foreign students starting to come from Trinidad, but also from other countries. The diversity of the studio is starting to change a little bit. And I'm just kind of curious, I went to the University of Akron, where I was in, I'm just calling balls and strikes. It was an all-white studio, but we were exposed to people like Cliff. Larry Snyder made a real hard effort to bring in people like Cliff and Bugsy Sharp and Earl Rodney and Mia and Liam and you name it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as a Midwestern kid, having your first your college experience being a place like NIU, where, if I'm calling balls and strikes based on what I'm observing, it's a predominantly Caribbean studio where you might actually be in the minority.
Oh, for sure. I was definitely in the minority the whole time.
And I don't want to, I'm not like casting a value judgment there, like, oh, it must have been so hard for you, because I know that's not the truth. And I know it was like, it was awesome for all of the reasons, but I'm curious for you, like, what were some things about your worldview, or maybe some things that you had grown up with that maybe like were when you were face to face with people that really sort of cemented some things that you maybe viewed, but also helped adapt some things and replant them in the right place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, honestly, and as cheesy as this may sound, the biggest thing that hit me, and I think I would have said this at the time, and I definitely say it looking back, is how much it cemented the value of hard work. Because like, I don't know many people that are harder working than Mia Gormandy. Like,
yep,
she works an insane amount all the time, and it's with 500 different projects. It's not like just one thing that she's all in on and whatever. She balances a crazy number of spinning plates. And I come from, like I said, very blue collar background. My dad started his business, and when I was growing up, he worked 70, 80, 90 hours a week. He worked as much as it took to get stuff done, and I didn't really always understand what that meant for him, for me, certainly at the time when I was very young, and for our respective futures, for the fact that it allowed me to go to NIU and study music and study steel pan, and not have to go get an engineering degree, or something a little more practical on paper, maybe. I think that definitely, that's the biggest thing for me. And the fact that that's so universal. I don't think I really realized that the work ethic that can come with either passion or necessity or whatever, it is so universal. I mean, there's not only does it matter where you're from or what you believe in, your religious beliefs, what your family did when you were growing up, the background you came from, either, I don't know, not to even speculate on people's backgrounds, but people come from some form of nothing, some form of something, some form of abuse, some form of privilege. It doesn't matter. The people that seem to find a way to work through and beyond those things are the ones that seem to be the most successful in my observation. And certainly at NIU, the students that were creative with how to...
Hey, Mike, I'm really sorry. My wife is on a business call and I'm on dog duty right now. So give me 1 second. I'll be right back. This is amazing. And it breaks my heart to have to even pause this. So give me 1 second, buddy. I'll be right back.
No problem.
All right, buddy, I'm back. Sorry. I may have to run in a second. Just, it is what it is. But
that's all right. My dog's probably going to bark at the least opportune moment too.
It's okay. All right, we'll clap this back to order. So one of the thing I was thinking about as I was running to get my dogs outside, which I'm going to have to get in a second, is that one of the things that dawned on me, I'm 42 now, and the thing that I'm realizing is a lot of a similar work ethic that I feel like I was around as a kid. Like, my dad was, woke up at 4, went to work at 5:30, came home at 6. Like, some nights it was later, some nights it was earlier. There was never a like clock out moment. My mom was a school teacher and she was always grading papers until they were done. It wasn't like she got paid extra whenever she graded those papers, And whenever I go to a steel band rehearsal, I recognized it very similar with Cliff Alexis. It's like, we're going to tune this pan until it's done.
Right.
And so, like, in a weird way, some things that I was taught about race were not about race. It was about a work ethic. And then I learned about race and stuff later. And Cliff was always telling me about things, but I didn't really understand the context of everything I was seeing. For instance, in Brooklyn steel band yards, like, this is very fascinating how in Brooklyn, where So Percussion is situated, why these neighborhoods are set up. Wow, the steel band has to move its yard every year, and then that's where, like, but I'm also, anyway, it's just for me, like, I'm identifying all these things. That's why I asked you that question for you. Like, what are some, just some things that imprinted on you a little bit in your time working with folks who didn't come from the same culture or background that you did? Like, what was it like being in the same classroom with, like, were you in school with Khan?
Yeah. Khan started.
He's the minister of culture. He's like the minister of culture in Antigua and Barbuda right now. Like, and you were like in the practice room with him, like shitting the bed on stuff like
Yeah.
together. Like, so can you just tell me like what did you take from that?
Man, I mean, so I don't know. It's certainly a theme in my life, but I have to say it's the hard work and creative application of that hard work. I mean, Khan has an ear and an eye for opportunity, right? He doesn't miss an opportunity to make a musical statement,
Mhm.
period.
Mhm.
Whether it's an opportunity for a gig, like a literal opportunity, or a really minuscule breath in the middle of a standard or one of his original tunes or whatever, where he feels the need or the opportunity to make a statement. He's going to make a musical statement. If there's a spot for it, he's going to make it.
Mm.
It would, which of course sometimes could mean not making a statement at all, but we don't need to get into that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things that's such an elegantly simple message, because it almost doesn't matter what you work on. When I was in high school, I studied percussion with Vern Spivak, and his big thing was, yeah, go home, practice steel pan, practice that as much as you want,
Mhm.
and then come back to your lesson next week. We're gonna play marimba. Like, you will learn something on steel pan that will help you be a better marimba player, right? And vice versa. So if you're working on jazz or pitching festivals, to play a gig, to assembling an instrument, learning to build in tune, learning to lay out a steel pan, learning to build a stand, whatever,
Mhm.
everything all feeds itself. So if you work hard
Mhm.
at one thing, it's going to lead you to more things to work hard at.
Mhm.
And that's going to continue to,
Right.
grow your envelope, grow your bag of tricks.
Well, in the spirit of the podcast, which is called Concert Honesty, like, can you tell me something that, like, really you felt a real struggle within yourself? Like, oh man, not like in like, I think black people are weird, like that sort of weirdness, but like, was there anything about like just differences culturally or in the way that music was communicated where you were just like, oh my God, this is so hard for me. Why is this so hard? Like, were there any moments for you or things that you still now, after having gone through it, you feel like, you know what, I'm right about that. This could be better if, and be willing to have that. Like, you could sit down with Khan on this podcast and have that conversation, like,
Yeah.
is there anything that you feel like on that level that you thought about or really chewed on after your time there?
You know, the one thing, particularly with the Caribbean people and myself, and at least my perception was the Caribbean people and the other American students in the steel pan studio, is their ability to internalize things.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that I'm any sort of amazing reader or whatever,
Right.
but I certainly use the crutch of reading and rationalizing
Yeah.
music, at least as I'm learning it, and sometimes as I'm performing it. And I felt like the Caribbean people had a particular knack. I mean, some of the Trinis, especially, and Khan, obviously not from Trinidad, but
Mm-hmm.
equally talented at just something that goes in the one ear and then it just rattles around in there forever. I feel like,
Right.
where I feel like it takes several passes of in and out before something sticks sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I feel that same exact thing. And I will say for me, yeah, I was asking the question, but like for me, honestly, the thing that I have had the hardest struggle with, both in Trinidad and in Brooklyn, is like the sense of the time structure of a rehearsal, like when things start, when things end. And that's been the
yeah.
hardest thing for me to navigate, because I was, I'm just going to call my privilege here. I was raised like, you didn't miss school if you were sick. You went to school. Like, I did all the things. I had perfect attendance all through elementary school, all through high school. Like, I never missed a class in college unless it was a snow day. Like, I'm just that was, my mom was a school teacher. Like,
Right.
so
Yep.
right or wrong, that's just how I was raised. I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's just who I am. So like when they say like steel band rehearsals at 7, I'm there at like 6:45.
Right. Yeah. Setting up and
no one
making sure your
shows up
mouths are
till
wrapped
like
right.
no one shows up till like 8:30. And like, but I still have, that's like for me, like I just still feel that like, oh, I gotta be there. But then but past, I mean, that's a dumb thing, because it has nothing to do with a work ethic. at all,
Oh,
because
for sure.
when people start rehearsing, we're willing to go till 4 a.m. They're willing to rehearse for 8 hours. It's just like when that 8 hours starts is kind of a more democratic thing than I think I ever imagined. And that is something that I think I'm having to tease out personally and be like, oh, that's not the way culturally I was raised. Nothing was democratic really. And like my teacher was like, your rehearsal starts at 7. If you're late, you get an F. And I'm like, okay, you know,
Right.
and so anyway, just to say, no value judgment, but that's been a real hard thing for me to actually grapple with. But the music, and when I say literacy, I don't mean again, no value judgment, but having a score in front of me. Kendall Williams asked me to drill a piece of his in Brooklyn. And so I came and I have the score and I'm like, I'm not hearing things and I'm looking up and I'm able to drill it. But everybody looked at me like I was a wizard. And I was like, I'm not like, I have terrible ears. Like I can't, no one can teach me the score, but I can look at it and be like, this line's not here.
Right.
Well, this, or this line's getting muddied because this line's too loud. That's something I can move those faders around all day.
Totally.
And so that has been trying to figure out how to communicate that in real time.
Yeah.
Has been a real struggle. Like, cause then I'll go down to Skiffle Bunch in Trinidad. Same deal. I have a score in front of me. Nobody there is reading a score, and it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just true. And so what am I supposed to do? Be like, start at measure 53,
Yeah.
No, that's not, I have to be able to say, start at the verse variation. They all know what the verse variation is. And then I can sing the first bar and they're like, oh, that plays.
Yeah.
And they all know how to play it from memory from there. I can't do that.
That the ability to start and stop a phrase, like in the middle of a phrase.
Right.
That always blew my mind too. Like someone would sing the last line of a Kitchener tune and then part of the first line, and then just in whatever key, whatever, doesn't matter. Some people will just jump right in from the second and a half bar of
right.
the, whatever.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing too, that like, I'm trying to adjust to my own teaching at NYU. Like Kendall is now teaching there and I'm purposefully having him teach by rote.
Yeah.
Because that's a process none of those students have really ever had. And I have a very little sort of foundation in. It's hard for me. So I got to imagine it's hard for these students who have never even really played pan to begin with. But I think culturally, it's important to me to make sure that these students that are paying what they're paying to be at NYU or NIU, for them to know that if they went to Trinidad, this wouldn't be a new experience.
Right.
They'd be at home. They'd feel like, oh, cool. I don't have to worry about this. I can now talk about like, where should I get good food?
Right.
And actually like, oh, can you tell me about the black beret you're wearing with the Black Panther logo on it? Like, what does that mean? You're talking to an older gentleman from the 60s. Like, those are the conversations that are actually way more important to you as a person than, is it C or C sharp? What was that passage? Oh, can you just write it down? Like, if I had that when I went to Trinidad in 2002, I would have learned so much more.
Yeah, totally.
And so I had to drink out of a fire hose for 2 days and it blew the back of my head out, but I survived and I'm here for it. And so and I constantly think of people like Cliff. I mean, for you, like, can you tell me, like, is there anything about Cliff that sort of like, if you had to give the elevator pitch on Cliff in your time with him, for better or worse, like, what would you say about Cliff? I know that's a complicated and possibly loaded question, but
yeah.
Knowing how much I dearly love the man, but
yeah. Well, I mean the like, for better or worse thing is probably just that Cliff was ultra stubborn.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Like, whatever he thought is what he thought. There was no, you weren't going to change it. He was glad to learn things, but if he already had learned, if he felt he had learned it and it was developed opinion, that's what it was.
Mike, that's a really, that's an important thing. I want to write that down. Like, if I'm happy to learn things, but if I feel like I've learned something, you have to really work hard to convince me to unlearn it. Well, that's humanity in general. Like, yeah. I think racism is a learned thing too. We have to teach people how to unlearn that. But you're right about Cliff in the sense that like, they were like, there was a specific way to speak to the C natural that you were trying to tune.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what you told him. It didn't matter if you were just like, Cliff, give up. You know, he would just keep doing it, you know. And so, but in a sense, like there's a, you know, he's also 85.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like that at that point, I want to give someone a little bit of room to be like, all right, you must have thought about this for a second.
Yeah.
I've thought about it for 42 years. So,
Yeah.
well, what else? What else?
So within that, his exceeding willingness to learn and or to hold on what he's already learned, he would share with anybody. I mean, I never once thought that Cliff withheld certainly an opinion, but definitely not information either from really anybody. You know, I know his personal life was his personal life, and those that know him pretty well know that it was pretty complicated at times, but he did a good job to keep that separate from raw information. You know, certain things you would educate people on, I guess. But if, you know, something he had learned, whether right or wrong, that he knew, he would be glad to explain it to you to the best of his knowledge if you ask the right question, you know?
Yeah. Cliff, I feel like, and Mike, I'm really sorry. This may be the best, shortest podcast I've ever done, but I've really appreciated it. We'll have to connect again whenever my wife's on a Zoom call and my dogs are going bonkers. So this is possibly the worst time, but I feel like we really drilled down on something really interesting here. But I would say, like, for me, the thing I take away with Cliff and all of my time, I would say across the board in the Caribbean Pan community, is this overarching sense of like protection. And this sort of like, it's earned, it's not like automatic, but like if you just come back a second time, and then a third, and then you sort of can't avoid the fourth and the fifth and the sixth after that, because then that feeling comes in of like, oh my God, Cliff would murder somebody for me. Like, that's a weird feeling. And I know that every time I go to Trinidad, every time I went to Trinidad before Cliff passed, I know he called everybody. I'm 42. I know Cliff called people. He didn't need to. That's a different thing. That's a weird feeling that I feel like I'm glad to have spoken to you about, because it's something that I wish, you know, more Midwestern white kids would get to experience, you know, like it's a real unique thing, because then I think that radiates out then to other things like race and how we talk to each other and how we communicate. And that's, you know, I appreciate you responding to the podcast. I think it's crucial. I'm not saying I agree with everybody who has a dissenting opinion with me. I vehemently disagree with people like Ben Shapiro on some things. I vehemently disagree with people like Jordan Peterson on 99% of what they say. But it's important to me to understand that those people exist, to understand what they're saying, so I can become educated and sharpen my axe, so that over the course of my life, I get a scalpel. You know what I mean? And right now it's a kind of a blunt axe. It's a 42-year-old axe, and I'm sort of still like hacking away. But I hope by the end I'm Cliff, and I'm sort of be like, nope, right here. And that is something he was able to do. And I think that radiated out to people like Yuko and Mia, and obviously now folks like you, and so on and so forth.
Well, and I'll never forget. So I two things. I'll never forget two things. Number one, the first time I met Cliff, I was 12 years old. I had seen the NIU Steel Band at the Norris Center in St. Charles, Illinois, which later had been a concert I got to play with the NIU Steel Band 5 times or 4 times. I went up and I introduced myself to Liam. I was, you know, all excited, you know, little kid, whatever. And I went to say hi to Cliff, and he like never looked me in the eye and gave me this limp handshake, but he did shake my hand and said thanks and walked away. Like 12, so I guess I think I was 16 or 17. So a few years later, I had gotten pans. I'd been to his office and sat there for hours while he tuned my instruments. I don't know why But whenever I took my pans, I was going to sit there as long as it took. I never dropped off an instrument unless something happened and Cliff's like, hey, I can't do it today. Leave it here. I'll have it for you in the morning or something like that, which happened, I think, twice.
Yeah.
But I've sat in his office for hours. When I was 16 or 17, I was at my dad's shop working on, it was maybe in the summer, it must have been. And Cliff called me back about when to bring my pan up to DeKalb, and I looked at my phone and said, oh, hey, it's Cliff. And my dad, who had only met him one time, I think previously, goes, oh, you better take that. Like, and then, later on, as Cliff got to know my dad when I was a student at IU and stuff, they kind of had a weird fatherly.
Yeah, because your dad started a business and so did Cliff.
Yeah.
And he started a department at a university as one of the only other Trinidadians to have ever done that outside of Ellie Manette. There's other I'm not saying there's not other folks in the scene, but like Cliff knows what it is to be a pioneer. And he sees respect. And I'm sure he saw your dad and he was just like, meh, meh, meh. Oh yeah, he's one of us. And I'm sure your dad and Cliff wouldn't have agreed on everything if you kept drilling down. But that disagreement was not the premise upon which their whole relationship would have shattered. It
was their really thick, strong hands.
Cliff's one big right arm. Well, Mike, I'm really sorry to have to wrap this up soon, but actually you've sort of made me think about what it means to do sort of like 20-minute podcasts. I want to dig deeper with you and have a really longer chat, but it's been nice to sort of just be like, hello, who are you? And let's talk about some intense stuff for 2 seconds and hopefully learn something. But
perfect.
I've appreciated it, Mike. You go feed your horses and I'll go take care of my dogs. And I will look forward to hopefully chatting with you longer in the future here.
Yeah, man. Anytime you got an opening, you know how to get me.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Take it easy. Stay healthy.
Thanks, Josh. See ya.
Bye. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.